Declaration. When you woke up this morning, did you purposely say, I'm going to confine myself to a box? Or do you just avoid putting any conscious thought into today? When you're busy going at it, literally or figuratively, do you ever find yourself pausing for a moment to realize what's going on? Or are you just reacting? When you hear the saying, "May I have your attention, please," do you continue as you were, or do you consider the information you're about to receive might actually be valuable? When I was growing up, my mother used to ask me to do things, and sometimes her reasoning was, because I said so. Looking back, I wish perhaps I took the time to pause, think, and consider the ramifications of my choices. Good Monday to you. Today is Monday, October 10th, 2016. This is episode number 21 of Pause, Think, Consider. Thank you for tuning in today. I'd like to make a request that everyone who is listening to today's episode, if you would, please pass on today's episode to somebody else that you know. It could be sharing a link to the episode on YouTube. It could be passing along a way to subscribe via iTunes, or potentially going on to Google Play. There's a myriad of different ways that you can connect with us and to listen to today's episode. Please pass one of those on the way that you like best on to somebody else. The topic for today is first impressions. For more information on this topic, you can visit the website at pausethinkconsider.com/impression. There's a multitude of different situations and different ways in which we encounter first impressions. We all have first impressions on a daily basis. I personally believe there's a few select examples, a few unique situations that I personally really take notice to and personally put a great deal of emphasis on. And ironically, there's one very obvious situation, very obvious circumstance that I would actually not include in terms of being one of the more valuable or one of the more important first impression situations. So to start, a situation that I personally believe is a huge first impression is when attending a restaurant. This could be a bar, this could be a place for breakfast, just a place for happy hour. Something in the food industry, a restaurant. And the first impression of that restaurant is paramount. And the example that I would use, my father and I watch a show on the Food Network called Restaurant Impossible. Since I've cut the cord, I haven't watched Restaurant Impossible in a few years. But if I was to go over to my parents' place, my father would definitely have this show on. Robert Irvine, who is the host of the show, the premise is it's a failing business that somebody essentially recognizes, passes on the information, and Robert goes in there and basically turns it on top of its head. They remodel the place, and some of them are successful at rebuilding the restaurant, and some of them are not. Not everyone is a happy story. And there's even some that, the ones that are not publicized, the ones that don't make it onto cable TV, that are incredibly sad, incredibly traumatizing circumstances. But the key, or one of the keys, that Robert talks about towards the end of the show, when they're getting ready to relaunch, they're getting ready to reopen the website or the restaurant, is making that, it's not a first impression anymore, but making that next impression. Getting that second chance and taking full advantage of that opportunity. And the viewpoint that I've personally always taken, I think my family takes this well. I know a lot of other people in my circle take this viewpoint too, is when, and it's unique, I think it's unique in Restaurant Impossible because we don't always have the opportunity of a first for everyone across the board. Maybe it's your first time going to this restaurant, but they've been open for years. Or in the case of Restaurant Impossible, they've been open, they've rebranded themselves, maybe they've worked a few of the kinks out, you went a week later. But even like going on opening night of a movie, going to opening night, the reopening of a restaurant, it feels as if that is the most important night. That is the most important single opportunity for that restaurant to make its name. Because if we look at a half-life or the laws of diminishing returns, essentially that first night, because everybody's healthy, it'd be like the first game of the NFL season, or the first game of the NBA, or first game of Major League Baseball. And there's always exceptions. There's always people that got hurt in training camp, or haven't recovered from an injury from the previous season. But relatively speaking, you are as healthy and at full strength, as full strength as you could possibly be in that entire season. So to relate it back to a restaurant, that opening night, in theory, should be the absolute best of everything that you give. It should be the best customer service. It should be the best food, the best presentation, the friendliest staff. Everyone should be on their absolute A-plus game. Not only from the standpoint because you know you're getting reviewed, you know the expectations, you know all of the PR that's going to come with it. It's the same thing with movies. And when that initial preview or sneak preview or opening night comes out and the masses see it and experience it for the first time, it is a game changer, either in the positive or the negative. And so in terms of first impressions, I always think that for restaurants, that initial opening night, that initial impression that you have on a customer is going to make or break. Because I know for myself, there are so many choices out there. And personally, I have the ability to cook. I know a lot of people, they don't know how to cook. They're terrible cooks. They don't like cooking. And so eating out is much more common than it is for myself. And so I put a larger weight on that experience because there's very few items that I'm going to go out to eat. If I just go out to eat and I get something that I personally can make, then it better be a great experience and it better be great quality. If it's not, I'm going to go somewhere else. I have no problem going to Whole Foods and getting the smoked meat bowl with brisket and sweet potato tots for $8.99. I don't need to go to a fancy steakhouse like Ruth Chris or any number of fancy restaurants because I'm sure it's prepared well. Well, it better be, but it's something I enjoy. And that's not to say I wouldn't try it, but I have the bar very high. There's very little room and margin for error in first impressions with restaurants. If I don't like it, it's very unlikely I'm going to go back. So that's restaurants. That's one instance where first impressions are paramount. Another one, and there's quite a few articles that I read and discovered when looking at first impressions. If you go to LinkedIn and you search via post, you type in first impressions, there are thousands of articles in the job field. But specifically, because I've had the opportunity to start a lot of jobs. I've had, if we're going to go by the millennial standards, because it's roughly every 2.5 years having a new job, I've unfortunately kept pace with that. In fact, I'm probably trending a little faster, not by choice necessarily, although one would argue that it is my choice. But starting a new job and that impression. And the interesting thing about businesses is there's the line and the philosophy of the customer is always right. And always putting your best foot forward for the customer. And everything's so customer-centric because, well, without customers, you don't have a business. Without customers, you don't have revenue. You're not able to pay for the employees that you have. You're not able to afford the luxuries that you have as an employee. And yet, there is so much focus and so much attention put onto employees, or rather onto customers, that the employees are the ones that very often are overshadowed. I don't want to get into specifics with specific companies or specific situations, but there have been instances, and several instances, where if I use the same analogy, the same reference like I do for a restaurant, that the first day on the job, that is when everything is fresh. There is the most amount of excitement. There's going to be peaks, there's going to be valleys, but especially the first day on the job. It's like the first day of school. It's like that first date. Very similar situations. That first day on the job, in theory, should be one of the best days that you have with that organization. And hopefully, for everyone's sake, it's sustained. But too often, as I mentioned, the focus is on the customer. New employees, new resources are brought in to help mitigate resource issues. There's too much work to go around. And as a result, because of trying to offload, because of trying to get out from underneath of all of the work and all of the being busy that everyone in the organization is, we forget the fact that there's an individual who just started their first day. They're not experiencing, they might very soon. That's probably a fair reason why they're part of the organization, is to help mitigate the resource issues you're having. And yet, it's the first day. They shouldn't be feeling the pain. They shouldn't be necessarily jaded in the manner in which you currently are. I've just found that too many companies just miss the mark when it comes to starting a new job and putting that best foot forward for new employees. It's just like with going to a restaurant for the first time. Paramount. And the third and final example that I'll give, where personally I believe first impressions are huge, and it probably is already covered with starting a new job, restaurant. This is very broad. But with having a background and a degree in marketing and advertising, I look at and I analyze on a daily basis. It's something that I enjoy. I enjoy the research and analysis part of marketing. And so I look at all the time brands, specifically looking at websites and the messaging or content. This could be their brochures, their TV ads, their radio ads, direct mail flyers, websites, paid advertisements, Facebook pages, videos, white papers. There's about 1 million different things that help compile a brand in that brand image. And just like starting a new job, and just like that first time attending a restaurant, a brand sometimes will lose that focus of what is that first touch point. They're so busy trying to distribute and get their message out that they forget where that entry point may be, where that initial introduction to the name of their company is coming from. And so because of all the noise, because of all the other competitors, there's an emphasis on distribution rather than the quality of the content, and it being the best user experience possible. Trying to leverage SEO and algorithms, and trying to position your brand ahead of your competitors. Too often, brands are negating the user experience. they are negating and disregarding what that potential first touch, first impression may be. And it can happen at various different points in the buyer's journey, in the purchasing life cycle. So much is about getting that customer. And the numbers show if you can get that customer, you roughly know what the lifetime customer value of that individual is. That the numbers and the data show that if we can get someone in, they're going to have, on average, be worth X amount. And yet, we have different entry points. And then we have different touch points after that. And I'm just not convinced there's enough thought put into that. Just not convinced that people are willing to put in the time and the effort, the meticulous effort, because it is very meticulous, very detailed, very thought, tactically driven to do so. It's a lot of work versus just spewing whatever bullshit you have out on Twitter or Facebook or creating a frickin' Snapchat. You're just blasting it out there because that's the hottest thing that you've heard. How on earth is anybody supposed to know what the hell you do? I look at on a daily basis brands that are on Facebook, because Facebook is the largest social network. And the interesting thing is looking at the engagement. Oh, well, it's just about brand awareness. Okay. Fair enough. You've got however many people that like your page, however many fans, and yet nobody interacts. Nobody interacts. Those people that like or are part of your page or your clan or your network, they are not engaging with you. If they're not engaging with you, maybe you're either in the wrong place or you're not giving them what they need. There's definitely, and I'm a huge believer in throwing a million different things at the wall, trying a million different things. This podcast has already had 2 to 3 different formats since the initial first episode. It's an always developing entity, as should be a brand, should always be developing. Whatever worked today isn't necessarily going to work tomorrow. And so that first impression with brands is paramount. Restaurants, starting a new job, and brands. As I alluded to earlier, one of the most obvious first impressions that I didn't include purposely, because I actually believe there are more situations where it does not matter rather than it does matter. I know this is completely opposite from what a majority of people think, but that first impression, that first introduction for new people, for meeting somebody for the first time, I believe it carries less weight than a majority of people give it. And I say that because of the exact opposite reason that I gave for restaurants starting a new job and brand as to why first impressions matter most for them. The first time that you meet somebody, the first time you have an introduction to an individual they should be at their absolute best. That first date, that should be the best. That first introduction to your newest mentor or your boss should be the best. And as a result of that, you're not getting a fair representation of the average of what that person is going to be. So if you take them at the first impression that you get, what if that person's an asshole? The first day, this would be a horrific way to start a career, but you come to the realization that your boss is an asshole, or this company you're interviewing with is an asshole. I think for a lot of people, they would say, okay, I'm moving on. Or if you're unable to, knowing in the back of your mind, okay, I need to find an exit plan. And yet, we don't take into account all the other factors. Maybe they were having a bad day. Maybe something else was going on. So whereas with a restaurant, because of all of the choices that I have very high expectations and I'm less willing to give them a second chance. Or with starting a new job, I have a very hard time saying, well, you guys screwed up day one, but, things are going to be on the rise from here. Or that first piece of content that I come in touch with for a particular brand, or I see a Facebook post, I'm less likely to go read more if the first time I interact with that brand is terrible. And yet with a person, that first interaction is amazing, I still feel like I need a little bit more. And I know this goes completely against what Malcolm Gladwell talks about. What he talks about in The Tipping Point. About only needing a fraction of a time. And your judgment in that fraction of a time compared to having more information is more often than not correct. That first snap judgment is usually accurate. And yet with people, I found that I like to give them multiple opportunities. I want to see as many interactions as I can as possible. Because I don't necessarily believe that people show their true colors in that first exchange. Maybe they do. I'm cautiously optimistic. So that is why I believe that first impressions with people is not as strong of an emphasis as my first impression with eating at the local deli. Now, as I alluded to, there's a lot of really great content, a lot of great articles and videos and webinars and seminars talking and discussing about the importance of first impressions. I'll give you 2 articles in particular, and I'll link to them on the website, that I really enjoyed and highly recommend checking out as well. The first one is by Susan Sandvik, titled How to Lose an Employee in 10 Days. And the great thing about Susan's article that she wrote was they're really basic steps. They're really things that I think we take for granted, whether we're in the companies shoes or the employee's shoes. And I wish I could remember the individual in the post that they made. It was a C-level employee, C-level executive for a snack brand. And they gave a photo of their desk on their first day of work. And they had all these snacks and pens and notepads and a welcome card. And it was almost overwhelming. It's like, good grief. Like, beyond what you would expect for your birthday, first day of work. And you mentioned in the comment that a lot of people have been posting these lately on LinkedIn. It almost is starting to feel like the norm. And yet, my comment was, if this was the norm, then you wouldn't feel compelled to post about it, because it would be the norm. And you wouldn't get such a reaction of, oh, wow, if it was the norm. But it's not, unfortunately. And that's where Susan's article, How to Lose an Employee in 10 Days, really pinpoints on, and it hit on a very personal level. You'll have to read it, but many of the things she talks about, I feel like were violated. And in some cases, led me to searching for other opportunities as a result of those mistakes. The other article, and I am not even going to attempt to say his last name. We'll just call him Harvey D. Harvey D's article is how the most emotionally intelligent people make great first impressions. It's on one of my favorite magazines, their website, fastcompany.com. And really great quick tips in terms of how to make a great first impression. Whether you're interviewing, maybe you're that restaurant owner, you're that chef, perhaps you're that executive, have an employee starting a new job. Maybe you've got your brand or your messaging, the content you're putting out there. Maybe there's ways, even though it's very humanistic, maybe there's ways you can incorporate that into your brand messaging. So a couple outside opinions on what we can do to have better first impressions. Now I've got three tactics, three personal tactics that are very near and dear to me for how to have good first impressions. The first being, treat others better than you've ever been treated before. Treat others better than you've ever been treated before. And the real key here is to make a lasting impression. In all the examples I talked about with the importance of first impressions, too often I found where I've had poor first impressions, the individual or the party on the other side was very me-centric. That restaurant owner or the bartender or the waitress or the boss or that company. We all have things that go on in our lives on a daily basis. And it is so difficult to be on. Just be not turned on, but turned on. In terms of having your best each and every day, each and every moment. It's inspiring when you run into people. I'm sure you've encountered them where they're just on. All day, every day. They are at their best. I like to think I have my moments, just like I think you would like to think you have your moments. But if we're giving ourselves a little bit of truth serum, being completely transparent with ourselves, we all have lulls, peaks and valleys. But especially when we encounter moments, we have those opportunities of a first. If you treat that person better than you've ever been treated before, that is a lasting impression that will stick with them. It is something that they will remember. It's a differentiator. If your goal as a brand is for each and every interaction that you have with a prospective customer to treat them the best that they've ever been treated, what do you think that's going to do for your brand awareness? What do you think that's going to do for your repeat customers at your local burger chain? What do you think that's going to do for employee turnover? It's going to increase all of those positive metrics and decrease all of the negative ones. There's the golden rule of treat others as you would want to be treated. This is going to the next level. Don't just treat people as you would want to be treated. Treat people better than you've ever been treated. Yes, it's selfless. Yes, it's very altruistic. But it's also making an amazing first impression. Number 2, take a genuine interest in whomever you come in contact with. Take a genuine interest in whomever you come in contact with. If you're that waitress, take an interest, ask. And I think for some patrons, they might be thinking that the waiter or waitress is simply trying to get a good tip. And I'm sure as a waiter or waitress, it's been successful. That's because people want to feel appreciated. You want to, on your first day of work, to feel appreciated. That people want you to be there. That you've rolled the dice and chosen them, and you chose right. You don't want buyer's remorse. If we're going to say the customer is always right and the customer is always first, you have to take an interest in them. Some examples of how to do that is be an active listener. We've talked about communication quite a bit. It is a very common theme that comes up again and again. It's because I believe we suck at listening. We're terrible communicators. We have too many self-interests. So be an active listener. Show some compassion. We're all busy. We all have a lot of things going. We all have to get to the next task or a deal. But that first impression, taking that extra moment, knowing that the individual across from you knows that you have something else you need to be doing or you should be doing, and how impactful is it when you say, no, I am here now. I am taking an interest in you. I am not running off. If I am late, I will reschedule. I will cancel. I will be late. I'm here for you. And all of that comes down to building relationships. To take a genuine interest in whomever you come in contact with. It's not about quantity. necessarily. It is about having as many quality relationships as possible and building those. And that comes with being an active listener and showing compassion for each and every individual. And the final tactic in regards to making a great first impression is don't just do it on day one. Go beyond and have a onboarding plan. Don't just do it day one. Go beyond and have an onboarding plan. You've probably heard of this concept. It's used very much in digital marketing, something I come in contact with and I've done a lot of work with. Drip campaigns or email marketing campaigns or lead nurturing. This whole idea of as you go along a path, depending on your reactions, will help serve new information. It's like taking a survey, like a choose your own adventure. And for every decision you make, every decision point, the choice you make has a different reaction. And I found that this is very uncommon. It is for the 1% of organizations, whether that be restaurants or employers or brands. It's prevalent with brands from a lead building, a lead qualification standpoint. Email marketing is one of the largest and fastest growing industries in the world. There's a lot of cool, flashy VR, virtual reality type things that are coming, leveraging mobile technologies, but using behavioral tactics and leveraging behavior for personalized content. I can't think of a better way to build a relationship. And so, just like signing up for the newsletter for your favorite local coffee shop, or that email string from your favorite clothing company in order to get 20% off, or the free birthday cupcake you get from the local bakery. For some of them, it's just that one email that you get. You get the 20% off and you never hear from them again. I think at this point, that's pretty rare. The birthday cupcake, that might be true. You might only get that one and only email. That's the only thing you get from them the entire year. I would say it's a huge missed opportunity, but we don't really use that for social capital. We don't really think about follow-up interactions. And I think businesses just suck at post-buyer, post-consumer purchase and opt-in. Once they have you in, my grandfather, my mother, my family in general always talks about, they got us by the balls. They don't have to treat us, they don't have to put out the red carpet for us anymore. I look at the example of a job. Starting your first day, because there are companies, I've seen them out there. I've seen companies that get it right. They get it right. They get day one right. They might even get week 1 right. But how do you go beyond that? Do you have a timeline? Do you have things mapped out so that, okay, the first day is memorable. It's great. You take the individual lunch. You have their workstation set up. Take care of all the BS paperwork they have to do. Introductions, a little bit of training, but a lot of team building. And then during that first week, you're continuing that team building. Maybe you go for an outing a few days later, a team building outing. Maybe it's happy hour on Friday. We get beyond that first week, and there's a half-life. It's almost like the honeymoon period's over. So how do you sustain that? How do you keep it going? That's not to say you need to take the individual out to lunch every day. We got to go to happy hour every week. But there should be something. Something. Maybe not every day, but every week. What's something every week when you bring on a new employee for your organization? What's something every week that's new, that's unique, that's different, that you can do for them to say, wow, I cannot believe I am a part of this organization. I love being here. How can you build that up and ramp that up so that no matter what time of the year, or what day, or what period of the month, let's say it's easy if they come in on a Monday. Oh, it's the start of the week. What happens if they come in on a Thursday? What happens if they don't come in the start of the month? It's easy to say, oh, they're coming in January 1. Although that would probably be unlikely because everybody's off. They come in on March 1st. It's easy. You got a full month. Everything lays out very nicely. If they come in on March 17th, having that standard operating procedures and lead them through the first year. Maybe even go backwards and look at, okay, we know day 1. What about year 1? What are we going to do on year 1 and work backwards? I've got day 1 and year 1. Now, how do I fill this in? Is there ways that I can randomize things in there? It's almost like a content calendar. This is what I'm going to do on this day. And have a little bit of latitude, but write it out. I guarantee you, if you have a full onboarding plan that goes a year long, that includes something on day 1 and at the end of year 1, and there are activities, there are milestones, there's team building exercises littered throughout day 1 and year 1, and it's organized, productivity is going to go up, the turnover is going to go down, the loyalty is going to go through the roof, and the advocacy is going to be higher than you ever could have imagined. So in recap, we've talked about first impressions. There was 3 specific examples where I personally find these situations to be paramount to the first impression experience. Restaurants. And that first night of opening or the first night experienced by the customer. If it is not a positive experience, the market is saturated. People are becoming better cooks. They will go somewhere else. They will take their money somewhere else. Starting a new job. ensuring that that first experience by that new employee is a positive one, is one that reinforces why they made the decision that they made to join your organization. And brands, the content, the messaging, how they leverage your website or social media channels. Huge deciding factor in the product life cycle and buying cycle. But one that we didn't talk about was that first impression of meeting somebody new. And that personally, I like to have more experiences. I want to see the true colors. Hopefully optimistic, but I want to see the true colors beyond that first interaction. Good, bad, or indifferent. 2 outside articles. How to Lose an Employee in 10 Days by Susan Sandwick. And How the Most Emotionally Intelligent People Make Great First Impressions by Harvey D. via Fast Company. And finally, the 3 tactics, the 3 methods to ensuring a great first impression is treat others better than you've ever been treated before, with aiming for the goal to make a lasting impression. Take a genuine interest in other individuals. By doing this through being an active listener, showing compassion, and really trying to build that relationship from the ground up. And finally, don't just do it on day 1. Have a mapped out plan. Have a drip campaign, your own personal email marketing campaign with your human social capital. If you can, have day 1 and year 1 and map everywhere in between. Standardize it so that regardless of when that person joins your organization or visits your restaurant or comes in contact with your brand, you are prepared. I want to thank you all for listening in today. Please check out the website at pausethinkconsider.com/impression. And please don't forget to forward on today's episode to one individual that you know. How you do that, completely up to you and in the power of your hands. You are empowered. I look forward to talking to you all again tomorrow on Pause, Think, Consider.